Welcome to Turning Back the Pages, the podcast where children's book authors discuss their favorite childhood books. I'm your host, Allie. Today, author Laura Bontje is joining me to discuss her favorite childhood book, The Wonderful Pigs of Jillian Jiggs. Laura Bontje is a fiction editor and children's book author who writes stories that celebrate childhood curiosity, language, and STEM. A former teacher, Laura worked in the not-for-profit industry before taking the leap into freelance editing. Her first book, Was It a Cat I Saw?, was released this past March. Her second, When the Air Sang, comes out on April 8, 2025, with more to come. When she's not reading and writing, Laura likes to follow her whims towards new hobbies. Having tried out crossword puzzle creation, cookie decorating, and watercolor sketching, she's currently teaching herself to crochet. Laura was raised in Calgary, Alberta, and now lives in London, Ontario, with her husband, 2 young kids, and a fluffy gray cat who behaves like a dog. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you so much for having me.
We should have crocheted together. I am also teaching myself to crochet.
Oh, that's wonderful. What have you been making?
I bought one of those Wooble kits.
Oh, wonderful.
And I made one for my daughter, and I love that. And now I tried to crochet a baby blanket, which was a big leap for my friend, but I didn't finish in time. Her baby shower's tomorrow, so maybe before the baby's actually born.
They have wonderful YouTube tutorials that I've been looking at whenever I don't understand what a stitch means in a pattern.
Yes. I have to do the same thing, and I practice and practice and practice. What are you stitching these days?
I've been working on little animals, so I've got some cicadas that I'm doing, and I also have just crocheted a couple of cats that I've got going for a giveaway.
Oh, I love that. I'll have to look into that, because my daughter is obsessed with cats. My oldest daughter is. She's outside reading your book right now, actually.
Oh, I love that.
All right, so you chose The Wonderful Pigs of Jillian Jiggs, which was a new book for me. I'd never heard of it, and it was very delightful.
Oh, I'm so glad.
So every episode we have a 30-second recap. I will put 30 seconds on the clock if you would like to start the recap in 3, 2, 1.
So Jillian Jiggs is a young girl whose mother says her room looks like it's been lived in by pigs. And one day she cleans up and finds a jar full of little buttons that remind her of pig noses. So she decides to actually fill her room with pigs, making a whole bunch of them out of crafted materials. And she gets a plan that she's going to sell them around the neighborhood. But once she falls in love with all of these pigs, it turns out that selling them to her friends is a little bit harder than she had originally anticipated.
Perfect. Awesome. Okay, well, can't get much better than that. Okay, I will give it a go. 3, 2, 1. Jillian Jiggs is a little girl who her room is just a mess, and her mom says it looks like a pig lives in there. She then, as she's cleaning up, begins to take on a new project of making all of these little cute little pigs, but she falls in love with them. And instead of giving them away, she teaches everyone else how to make their own. Which I think we did it right at the same time.
Fantastic.
Awesome. All right, so let's talk about the author, Phoebe Gilman. And I have a little quiz if you are wanting to answer some trivia questions about
Oh, sure.
Ms.
Let's
Gilman.
go for it. I do love trivia.
Okay, Phoebe Gilman was born on April 4th, 1940 in the Bronx. She was the second of 3 children born to John and Hannah Gilman. Her father worked in a textile factory before pursuing his love of photography. It's her mother to whom she attributed her love of books. Phoebe's favorite type of books were, do you know?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I'm going to guess. Could it be children's books?
Fairy tales.
Is that? Oh, fairy tales. All right.
Okay. And she said that when the pictures didn't match the images that the words had painted in her head, she would cover up the picture with her hands. And she would do that in her whole life.
I love that.
She went to the High School of Art and Design and then the Art Students League. She spent 15 years at the Ontario College of Art teaching others to draw and paint. Did she consider herself more of an artist or a writer?
I'm going to guess an artist.
Yes, being a writer was a surprise. And it was actually because of her daughter that she became an author. So when Leora's balloon burst on a tree branch, Phoebe wished that the tree would magically sprout balloons. It didn't. What sprouted was an idea. She thought, why not write a story about a tree that blossoms balloons? And that's how she came to write her first book. Do you know the name of that first book?
Oh, I don't. It has something to do with balloons and trees. Is it The Balloon Tree?
It is The Balloon Tree. Very good.
I have not had the pleasure of reading that one, but I remember seeing its name.
Yeah. So it came from this real life idea or the situation, and it turned into a story. Writing the book, of course, wasn't as easy as simply having an idea, writing it down, and painting some pictures. Ms. Gilman said it took her 15 years and countless rejection letters before the book, having gone through several versions, was finally accepted for publication. She was the illustrator for her own works. Her passion was making books and bringing them to life. She died in Toronto on August 29th, 2002, after being diagnosed with breast cancer and leukemia. What made you pick The Wonderful Pigs of Jillian Jiggs?
You know, this was such a hard decision because I grew up in such a rich literary environment with parents who made sure I was surrounded by picture books all the time. So there were countless stories that I could have chosen. But there were a couple of reasons that I thought about this one. One is that it was a book that I read over and over again as a child. And actually, it's part of a series about Jillian Jiggs, which I didn't realize when I was a kid. It's possible that I had read some of the other ones, but this is the only one that I really recall having continuously throughout my childhood. And it's one that now, with my own children, I've read a lot of times. But I also thought about just how joyful it was, and at the end of the book, there is back matter that includes instructions for making your own pig out of old stockings, which is something that I can remember doing with my mom as a kid.
Oh,
and
fun.
I love that that memory of the book just kind of extends past the reading itself and into those memories of crafting and putting things together as a family.
That's really fun. Yeah, I saw that, and I wondered if that was just a this edition thing or if that was in the original book. So,
no, that was definitely there in my childhood as well.
I love that. Now, this particular copy is very old, I can tell. But that's really fun. That was one of the things that when I read it to my daughter, I covered that part up because I was like, we don't have time. I was reading it at bedtime. I was like, we don't have time to do this right now. So
I've definitely done that as well before to pretend that the crafts are there for a different day.
Different day. This is not a today thing at 8:00 at night. So what is your memory of first reading The Wonderful Pigs of Jillian Jiggs?
Oh gosh, I've read it so many times as a child that I don't even have a memory of the first time. It feels like it was always there. But when I was a child, one of the things that I adored about it was just the creativity of all of the different pigs. So for people who haven't read it before, Jillian goes through and she makes dozens and dozens of pigs, and the story explains what they're all like and what they look like and their personalities. As a kid, one of my favorites was the family of Martian pigs, Beep, Bop, and Boo. But as you look at these illustrations, there's a couple of pigs in the first introduction there that get put together as a boyfriend and girlfriend, and later on there are two little baby pigs that arrive with them, and then the queen is holding them, and everyone's going around. So these pigs aren't really described as having really an interactive life outside of the ones that are being described in that moment, but in the illustrations you can see them all interacting with each other and just having tea parties and having fun together. And I think for children that's such a beautiful reflection of the way that we play with our imaginations. And I was a kid who loved stuffed animals and make-believe, so I think that really speaks to me as well, the idea that your toys are enjoying a life of their own as you're playing with them.
Oh, yes. This felt very real to life as far as the way she plays with the pigs, and they each have their own personality and their own, my kids' animals have meetings right now, and the next day I hear all about what their meetings are. And so it felt very much like that Jillian had a rich inner creativity.
Absolutely.
And
my family's very much the same. We have our copy of it right now is in a compendium of 5 stories. So it's one of those thick hardcover books. And I went to go get the book today to read it again before our discussion. And I had to pull it out of the walls of a crib that had been built out of books for a stuffed animal to be lying in one of my kids' rooms. So the story inspires curiosity, the physical book itself inspires curiosity, and
Yes.
I love that.
That's awesome. How has reading it changed through the years?
I think one of the biggest things for me reading this was not necessarily with the wonderful pigs themselves, but as I was reading this compendium of Jillian Jiggs stories with my kids, there's another story later in the book called Jillian Jiggs to the Rescue. And in the background of one of the images, they're just walking off into the woods to go hunt a monster. It's another very cute story. And they're walking through this hill, but far in the background, you can see the Toronto skyline, or the 1980s version of the Toronto skyline, which in itself is a fascinating thing to look at, with none of the skyscrapers there. But the CN Tower stood out right away. And when I was a kid, I grew up in Calgary. I don't know that I would have recognized the CN Tower offhand, but it's a background detail that's not mentioned as part of the story. It's just a reflection of the fact that Phoebe Gilman was living in Toronto while she made these stories. But as an adult who is now pursuing a career as a writer in Canada, to me that just was so meaningful to realize that this story that I had loved all through my childhood is not just a picture book, but a Canadian picture book. And as an adult, I've really come to realize how much of the media we consume in Canada is influenced by what's coming out of the United States. And it's been really special to be able to celebrate Canadian literature with my kids and showcase places that are around them. You know, they've been to Toronto, they've seen the CN Tower, and to be able to show that the things that are meaningful to them in their lives are also things that they can see reflected in literature. And that's been something that as a writer is important to me as well. So we'll talk about that a bit later, but one of my books that's coming up is with a Canadian publisher, and it was really important to me that we consider the Canadian publishers when sending out my books, because I want to be able to reflect the country that I'm living in and writing in with my kids, and the wonderful tradition of literature and art that has come out of Canada.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I wondered if that was one of the reasons so I live in the deep south, and I wondered if that was one of the reasons that I had not heard of this book. And I'm so glad that I did. It's a very sweet book, and I love the illustrations. But yes, I feel like we are surrounded with, a lot of it comes from the United States. And
as a kid, often you don't think about where the books you're reading come from necessarily. So, I knew this story. I know a lot of people around me who grew up reading Jillian Jiggs, and it never had occurred to me that, that might be why she was such a phenomenon, Phoebe Gilman here in Canada, but not necessarily a household name elsewhere, it turns out.
Right. Yes, it was not with me. So as a child, what themes stood out, and why do you think these themes stood out to you?
Oh, that's a good question. The creativity for sure, and being able to come up with the different personalities for the animals. I had mountains of stuffed animals, and they all had different personalities and things like that. And that attachment too. I still have my childhood teddy bear Bubby, and he was treasured to me as a child and still is. But I can remember as a kid cycling through which stuffed animal got to sleep in bed with me alongside Bubby that night to make sure that their feelings weren't hurt and that they were all getting equal attention. And I think that really resonates with me when I think about Jillian's conundrum at the end of the book about how she could possibly get rid of these pigs, but also just the silliness that's built into that at the same time, that she doesn't just say, oh, I'd like to keep the pigs. It's this one has the flu and this one would miss the other one. And she has all of these reasons that, it's not her choice. She just has to let the pigs stay with her.
Yes, I love that. I also have my childhood bunny named Sparkles. She lives upstairs with my oldest child, and she every once in a while will pull it out for me and say, do you want to give Sparkles a kiss? Yes, I think I can see how that would stand out to a child, just the attachment to the animals, because they are precious. What themes stand out to you today? Has that changed?
Today, I think it makes me think about that same theme in different ways. We talked at the beginning about crocheting, and as I've been making these different animals, I had the intention of making some to give away and some that are gifts. And of course, every single one that I make, my children say, well, can I have that one? And I've said yes a lot of the time because I
Mm-hmm.
look at them and think, well, that one's really cute in this way. And this one was the first one that I made. And so as I was thinking about what book I wanted to talk about today, I thought, my goodness, that makes me think of Jillian Jiggs because that's exactly what she goes through at the end of the book, that
Mm-hmm.
you've put all this effort into them and it's hard to let go. But I also love, as an adult, the moment at the beginning of the book when she decides to make the pigs, because the idea of her room looking like pigs is something that continues from the first book in the series,
Mm-hmm.
which is all about her not cleaning up her room. And this one starts when she has decided to clean up her room and she discovers something in there that she hadn't really noticed before, which is
Mm.
that jar of buttons
Mm-hmm.
that look like pig noses. Um, and as a parent, I can absolutely relate to that moment where your children have finally cleaned up, and then it's like, oh wow, I completely forgot that I owned this toy or this object. But also just that magical moment of like, this reminds me of something. What can we do with that now?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I noticed just the first time reading it as a parent is that she cleans the room and they're celebrating, and then she bakes them, and her room goes back to just looking like pigs live in them. And this time,
Absolutely.
pigs do
Yeah.
live in them, but it is this picture right here. I know the audience can't see, but this
Oh,
picture made
yes.
me laugh because that's how I feel every single time. For those listening, the mother is jumping up at the fact that Jillian has cleaned up her room, and then within a couple of pages, her room goes. I mean, it's like 2 pages later, her room is going back
Yeah.
to being a mess, and that's so true to life.
Absolutely. The other thing I love about that illustration that you showed is that Jillian is sitting on a toy chest and you can see things spilling out. There's a
Yes.
teddy bear that does not fit. There's a jump rope hanging out, some fabrics. So clearly she has just swept everything up and crammed them into this chest. And there is a chest that looks a lot like that in one of my kids' rooms right now. So I love that. Phoebe Gilman clearly understood what it means to be a child and to be a parent.
Yes, very much. We have that. We have that in our living room. Our ottoman has just babies hanging out, and sometimes the baby doll hands will stick out, and it's ever so slightly creepy for people who first come to our house, and they're like, "Oh, is there a hand sticking out? Or a piece of hair, like a doll hair, sticking out?" If the brief conversation that Laura and I have just had about the art in Jillian Jiggs is at all fascinating to you, be sure to subscribe because I think you'll find next month's mini-series really interesting. I'm talking to 3 different artists of children's books about art and their favorite childhood books. It's definitely different, but really fun, especially if you're interested in stories, art, or the process of publishing a book in general. Be sure to subscribe today. What is your favorite part of Jillian Jiggs?
Oh, that's such a great question. I really love, as an adult, the moment that she decides at the end to teach everyone to make their own pigs. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's, a beautiful lesson that there's that creativity that can be shared. And of course, it lets her keep all of the ones that she's already made. But I think it's a really fun moment of how to extend the fun that you're having with other people and
Mm-hmm.
not just have this game be a one and done. She
Mm-hmm.
sells her pigs, and then even if she didn't miss them, that would be the end of it, unless she
Mm-hmm.
made more, I suppose. But the book ends with her sitting in this sewing circle that she's made of children, and there's a child wearing a sign that says Jillian Jiggs Wonderful Pigs, 10 cents a pig, but it's been crossed out, so it says 10 cents a lesson. And you can see the whole neighborhood has come together,
Mm-hmm.
and I just love that idea of all of the kids having this common purpose. Um, One of my kids got really into rainbow loom at school last year, which,
Mm-hmm.
for those who don't have children of that age, is um, kind of like this generation's version of friendship bracelets using little elastics that you hook
Mm-hmm.
together in different ways. Um, and they would do this at recess, and kids would bring in their loom kits and share them around. And I just love that, whatever generation it is, whether you're making daisy chains or sewing pigs or putting together rainbow loom bracelets. There's something so communal and fun about coming together to do that craft together with friends and chit-chatting as you're working on something together.
Yes. I love the idea that you mentioned the creativity is shared, and that's such a community. And, just this is not a question planned, just came up. How do you think that has affected your own creative life?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think that a lot of my creative pursuits have been things that are really individual in the past. And sometimes that's difficult because I love having things I can do with other people, but reading and writing and painting and crafting and baking cookies, whatever it is that I've decided to do, are solitary pursuits unless you invite someone to join in with you. But recently I had a friend suggest that she could come over and we could just do some painting together as we hung out. And I thought, well, what a beautiful idea. People used to do that. That was the way predominantly women especially would have socialized in generations past, was to have sewing circles or knitting bees or whatever it is that people were working on. And I loved that idea of bringing that into kind of our modern version of that we could both work on our hobbies together.
I love those thoughts because that is something that I have noticed, that creativity or creative pursuits that I've pursued have been very solitary as well, and yet there's been an energy that I find that the moments that I can join in a community of creatives that is so life-giving, and it's such an interesting thing as as a writer. It is so solitary, but there is also the aspect of coming together and doing things together is so life-giving.
Absolutely. And as an author, it's a fundamental part of the process, I find, because the writing itself happens alone. But I have critique groups and people that I share my work with, and those moments are instrumental in helping the book to become better and look at it from the reader's perspective. So even if the writing happens in isolation, the creative process as a whole cannot. And then, of course, the process of putting a book together is such a collaborative experience. And with a picture book especially, you have the illustrator coming in, bringing their perspective to things. And it's a really beautiful moment to watch that come together and see how people can take their two different perspectives and approach a story to put together something that's altogether new.
Right. Yes, going back to the women sewing in a circle are coming together to sew. My public library, one of our public libraries, has a sewing circle for knitting and crocheting that I'm hoping to get to this fall.
Oh, I love that. I think ours has one too. That's such a fun idea.
Yes, I love the public library.
Public libraries are wonderful.
We have a excellent system of public libraries, and we are at least one of them at 2 or 3 times a week, and they are great. Well, you've already said that you were an avid reader as a child, so why did this book stand out to you?
This one stood out partly because I think it was one that I read so many times, and there were a lot of books as a child that, of course, we would go to the library and read them and then return them, but there were a few that I owned that we came back to again and again. So this is one that I remember reading frequently. And in fact, when I was perhaps in my 20s or so, in 2013, my hometown of Calgary experienced terrible flooding. And my parents lost everything that was in their basement. They were very lucky that the rest of the house was okay, but a lot of those things in the basement were items like the boxes of childhood treasures and whatnot. And so the books that we had saved from my childhood, I'm sure Jillian Jiggs was in there, were lost in the flood. And that year at Christmas, completely unplanned, my mom and I both bought each other a couple of children's books that had been important to me when I was a child as a Christmas present. I didn't even have kids at the time, so this was just a reflection of how wonderful those picture books had been as an important part of our lives.
Aww.
And when I think back, part of what makes it so difficult to have chosen a favorite is that it wasn't necessarily that Jillian Jiggs and Wonderful Pigs Sorry, let me start that again because that's not the title of this book. It wasn't so much that The Wonderful Pigs of Jillian Jiggs was the most special or the most memorable. It was that it was part of this tapestry of special, wonderful books that enriched my childhood and that I could go to. And I'm just so grateful to have had that opportunity to read so many different things and have all of these different stories that could stick with me throughout my life.
Oh, that's beautiful. Would little Laura be surprised she read a book?
Not in the slightest. That was always my dream. I've wanted to be a writer as long as I can remember. On my most recent visit home to my parents' house, they pulled out some of my childhood things that had survived, school projects and whatnot, and there were so many stories that I had written and illustrated. I did not grow up to have the art skills to illustrate my own books, but the writing, absolutely. The thing that did surprise me is that it ended up being children's books, because as I got older, I always envisioned writing a novel, and that's still something that I'm interested in. But it wasn't until I started working as a children's book editor that the idea of writing a picture book really started to seem like something that I was passionate about. And I think having young kids at the time also inspired that I was just surrounded by children's ways of thinking and children's stories, and I realized what a neat opportunity it would be to dive into that myself.
Right. Yes, I can relate to that. I think being around children's books now has opened my eyes to how special children's books are. Like, I remember so many from my childhood, but being around them again, it's really a particular skill of taking this huge thought and putting it into a small number of words and making a beautiful story that really shapes so many little minds.
Absolutely. And it's been really special to reflect on the books that were meaningful to me and that lasted through my life. But as a parent, it's been even more special to watch my children fall in love with books.
Yes.
And I was reading The Wonderful Pigs of Jillian Jiggs to my youngest the other day, and it had been quite some time since we'd read it together. And I didn't realize that they had read it at their grandparents' house a few times as well. And so they were able to join in and complete some of the phrases, and they knew the repeated refrain that comes up through the book. And it was just a wonderful full circle moment to think of myself reciting those phrases as a child, and now my own children being able to remember these same things and, getting whatever it is that they're going to get out of this story as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So you just published a book earlier this year.
Yes, I did.
And then you have another one coming out in April of 2025. So why don't you tell me about that one?
Absolutely. So coming up in April 2025 is When the Air Sang, which is going to be published by Canada's Anik Press, and it's illustrated by debut illustrator Sarah Wong. And when I tell you that her illustrations are going to just blow you away, I was sitting at the community pool when the sketches came in, and I cried when I saw them for the first time. And I'm sure the lifeguards thought that something terrible was happening in my life, but her work is absolutely gorgeous. So this is a book that, when I was learning about Phoebe Gilman for this interview, the author of The Wonderful Pigs of Jillian Jiggs, I thought, isn't it neat that she got her start this way too? Because you talked about her having that moment with her child and the balloon tree and that transforming into a book. And that's very much how my story started as well. So When the Air Sang is the story of a young girl named Annie, who is an explorer who loves insects, and she is always on the move looking at the insects in her backyard. And then she discovers these holes that have appeared, and the women in her family, her mother, her grandmother, and her great-grandmother, explain that these are holes for the cicadas, the 17-year periodical cicadas that are going to be emerging and coming out to sing. So Annie really wants to see them, but it takes time, and she's not a kid who likes to pause and take time to wait for things. But because these cicadas come out every 17 years, her family members remember the last time that they were able to experience that. And they tell her stories from their childhood about how meaningful it was to witness this experience. And for me, this was my second book that's coming out, but it was actually the first manuscript that I ever wrote for a picture book. And it was inspired by a moment with my own child when we were in our backyard in lockdown in summer 2020 during the start of the pandemic. And we saw a cicada on a tree that had been freshly molted. Mm-hmm. Now, we don't have cicadas like this in Alberta where I grew up. Mm-hmm. So I had always seen the cicada husks on trees, the little empty exoskeletons. And I thought that an adult cicada must look the same way. You know, when a snake sheds its skin, it looks the same as it did before, just maybe a little bit bigger. So I thought a cicada was the same. And instead we saw this beautiful bright green creature with these lacy wings. And I was absolutely blown away and thought, there has to be a story in this moment. And it took me a few months to figure out what that story might be. But it eventually transformed into this story of Annie learning to find the patience and the wonder in waiting for something magical to happen in her backyard.
Oh, that sounds like a beautiful book. I can't wait to read it. Who do you hope reads it?
I hope that it's read by children who love insects and things like that are sometimes not seen as the most conventional interests. I've got a child who stops to pick up every bug they see, and another one who is not so fond of the bugs. And I think that for kids who have these interests, it's so wonderful to be able to foster that. But I also hope it's read by kids who maybe haven't considered how something like a cicada could be beautiful. And I'll be honest, I was kind of creeped out by them when I first saw them. And I wasn't sure what to make of these insects. And through the process of writing the book, I have found them to be so beautiful and so fascinating. And I even went on a little tourism trip earlier this year to go see the periodical cicadas that had emerged after 17 years. And, you know, they're so gentle and wonderful. And it was really special for me to be able to change how I looked at them. And I hope that my book can help do the same for others.
Yeah, that's really cool. I saw your Instagram where you were in Naperville, Illinois.
That's right, yes.
Did you go any other places to watch, or was that where you went?
No, it was, I live in southwestern Ontario, so I drove down to Illinois because it was the nearest place to me that was going to have a large emergence of cicadas. Okay. But it was absolutely magical. You know, with the book coming out next year, I didn't want to wait another couple of years for the cicadas to come out, and it was the coolest experience to get there in person and realize that something I had only had the opportunity to experience through videos and research before was exactly like I had imagined it was going to be. Fun. It was amazing.
That's awesome. I'm glad you get to experience that. What do you hope readers take away from the book?
I think that I would love for them to appreciate taking the time to look at the little things around us. That's something that as a parent I've really found my children have inspired, and it's then inspired a lot of my writing, is that they do slow down and look at what's going on in the world, and they get curious about it. And I think it's too easy for us to lose that as adults. So fostering that in children for sure. But there's also a moment in the book where Annie doesn't achieve something that she was hoping to. And that was really important to me, that she doesn't actually get everything that she was imagining right away. And she still has a amazing positive experience and is able to maintain that hope as something to strive for in the future.
Oh wow, that sounds really great. I really can't wait to read this book. This
thank you
sounds
so
like
much.
A great one. Can you share where people can follow you, buy your book, or anything else that you have going on that you want people to know about?
Absolutely. So my first book is called Was It a Cat I Saw? And that's available online and in stores wherever books are sold. When the Air Sang, the one about cicadas, is available for pre-order now, wherever you get your books. And I'm most active on social media on Instagram, where my handle is at Laura Bontje Books. That's BONTJE. And you can find my other social media links on my website, which is laurabontje.com. I've also recently launched a new email newsletter, and I have a fun giveaway going for a free signed book for new subscribers. So be sure to check that out on my website as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. And to the audience, thank you for joining me today for this episode of Turning Back the Pages. If you have any author suggestions, please feel free to email me at whatallywrites@gmail.com. You can also follow the show on Instagram or Twitter at whatallywrites. Allie is ALLY, and don't forget to subscribe.